All right, guys, we'll get going here, guys. If could have everybody's attention, and just want to thank Ken for carving out a little bit of time on the agenda for us to introduce you guys to a new crop opportunity that we're working with. So, my name is Patrick Crampton. I'm the business and product development manager with Agri Soma. Daryl Males is agronomy and breeding, and then we've got Bob Hood and Trevor Anderson who are helping manage our production here this year. A lot of people ask us, first question is, who is Agri Soma? We're a Canadian company. We're actually one of Canada's longest standing biotechnology companies. We were formed in 2001, and we have our own biotechnology platform, and we've really focused in on working on these new industrial crop areas. And the first crop we're working with is this new crop called Brassica carinata, which you guys see here. A little bit of background on the Carinata crop. It's a new type of brassica. It is related to both the Gencia type of mustard, the Gencia canola. It's also related to canola, but it's a different type. It is more of a mustard type of a crop, more heat and drought tolerant. And Ag Canada has had a breeding program working on it for about 10 to 15 years. Originally came in from Ethiopia, but it was about a 130-day crop when they first brought it in. So a lot of work's been done to shorten the days to maturity to make it fit for southern Western Canada regions. So we've launched our first commercial variety this year, which Daryl will talk a little bit more about the variety that's out there, the future of the breeding program. I just want to talk a little bit about the marketing opportunity, what the crop's being used for, and a little bit about the agronomics. So. This is different from a canola in the major way in terms of it being an industrial oil. So it's not a food grade oil, it's focused on industrial uses, and there's specialty chemistry markets, there's biodiesel, but a lot of the excitement is around biojet fuel. And because of the oil structure, it has some efficiencies in the conversion of biojet that has a lot of people excited. Last July 1st, they approved use of 50-50 blends of biojet fuel in planes, and you may have seen some announcements over the last number of years of test flights being done, etc. So it's a developing industry. There's a lot of excitement. The U.S. is driving it pretty hard in terms of their military use. Air Canada just June 16th flew a flight from Toronto to Mexico. Sorry, that was, yeah. End of June, flew their first flight. Porter Airlines has flown a flight in Canada, so it's even happening here in Canada. So a lot of excitement there, and it is because of it is this non-food oil. It has a 10 to 15% increased conversion efficiency than what you might see from a food oil going into biojet fuels. So new opportunity, new markets. This is a bit of a herbicide trial with Eric Johnson working with Ken and his team on. A little bit of experimental use, looking at new herbicide options. And then Daryl will talk a little bit about what we've got here is more of an agronomy trial. But it's a great opportunity to come and see the crop because it does grow differently than what you might see with a Gencia or a Napus brassica. So the crop is a mustard type, as I mentioned. It does have a strong biotic in terms of environmental stress. Stands up very well, very heat and drought tolerant, and loves this kind of heat that we're seeing right now. And I think the Farming Smarter guys can talk about how quickly this crop's advanced just over the last number of weeks. I think the seeding dates, Daryl, are what, May 8th, 11th, and 16th in terms of the 3 seeding dates in the different trials, and you can just see how fast the growth is of the crop. And also, abiotic, which is a lot about disease resistance. Carinata, we talked about blackleg earlier, is basically resistant to blackleg. It's got a number of extra genes that, in fact, a number of companies are looking to try to move into Napus and that to improve the blackleg tolerance. So very good on blackleg, very good just native disease and insect resistance, as some people commented mustard is kind of known for. It is, we call it a vigorous, adaptable growth habit, and you guys can see for yourselves, it's highly branching, and just encourage anybody to walk up and look down into the canopy. And there's canola, right here behind the sign is actually Gencia, cutless mustard, I think. Then there's a canola variety, and then you got Carinata right beside, and just try to look straight down and you can see the different structure of the pods and the flowers of the crop, which is pretty interesting to see. It is also a large seed. Our current first variety is an open pollinated, but actually the seed size of Carinata is about as big as your biggest hybrid seed, so you get a good start. It is an OP. Darryl will talk about it. There's hybrid systems in development that we'll see in the next number of years, but it is a very large seeded, which helps it get out of the ground and get going in the spring.
Herbicide tolerant?
It is not herbicide tolerant currently. There's work going on that, but a big exciting part is Eric Johnson at Ag Canada has done all the tests, and there's a number of herbicides already submitted, uses submitted in terms of minor uses. And basically, long story short, all of the selective herbicides that work on canola look to be working with Carinata, which gives you your options of, Edge and Treflan. We submitted for minor uses with Mustard Gold, Prosper and Prosper Evergold, the new seed treatments from Bayer are already registered. There's a minor use coming for Helix, so some seed treatment options. Lawntrell right now, we're looking at the low rate of Lawntrell. There's more work to be done on Lawntrell. And then Eric is just this year doing some tests on the tank mix of Lawntrell plus Muster, and just to make sure that we've got that safety factor there. So, a lot of good herbicide options, especially for we call it a new crop, although it's been worked on for, like we said, 10, 15 years with Ag Canada. So frost tolerance, it being the background of it, it's very good frost tolerance. It's probably a little better than what you'd see with a canola in terms of frost tolerance. So it's that kind of the structure of the plant, and if it's the thickness of the cuticle, whatever it is, the same thing that sort of contributes to some of the heat tolerance gives it some of that frost tolerance as well. So Darryl will talk about that a little bit. It's about 105 day to maturity, so it's a long canola, in terms of reference, so very much in the southern zones. We have this year, about 40 guys growing, 160 acre, some up to 200, 250 acres. Medicine Hat, into Oyen, a lot down in, Trevor himself is third year growing Carinata. Probably has the distinction of the only grower in Western Canada to be growing it for the third year. And Trevor's down in Frontiers, so we've got sites scattered all the way out. I know at the Farming Smarter Tour in Medicine Hat, we've got Carinata. We actually have a yield trial showing some of the newer varieties in development. And there's a few fields nearby that will, anybody who's interested at that tour, will go take them and see after the tour. So. Yeah, it's seed is buying from, we're working with Patterson for the contracting of the program. So Patterson's managing the closed loop IP. And then really, honestly, there's going to be new varieties of this coming through almost, every year, every other year, because we're very early on that yield curve. And
where's the seed grown at?
so the seed's being grown in 5 sites in Western Canada right now. The seed we put in the ground this year was actually grown in Chile in terms of the effort to bulk up the whole program. So
it's a high heat unit crop? Or?
Yeah, it handles, the best example to put a degree on it, when we do our biotech work in our labs, the temperature's turned up 3 degrees higher than you would ever do an APIS, a canola program. So it really does, and it grows faster in those conditions than what you would see. So the yield, Darryl will talk a little bit about in terms of the yield, but it's 15-20% over the mustard yield checks that we've looked at, and it's really a situation where if you're growing canola, we've had some good moisture, you're growing a 35 bushel canola crop consistently, and not worried about heat and all this sort of stuff. We're not trying to take away from canola acres. We're looking at a more heat and drought tolerant crop that can give you that same kind of consistent yield, year in, year out, even when you get hit with these kind of, hot and days where you start to see that blasting effect. So.
What about shattering?
Very shatter resistant. It's a straight cut crop. Yeah, just like the other mustards. Yep. We're basically, with the acres we're looking at now, it'll be toll processing for now. And so there's a number of options, not much in Canada, to be honest. So there'll be a little bit of, most of the biojet manufacturing right now is actually in the southern US. And so there's actually a lot of options down there when you look at crushing options. So, yeah. Yep. Yeah, grown on contract, exactly. Yep. Being a non-food oil, it's got a specific market, and so we want to make sure we've got the demand there and contracting those acres. Like we had basically 6,000 acres in the ground this year. We spread it out to these 40 guys to get as much experience as possible in different areas and different environments, and we'll be looking to expand that this fall and kind of launch the program into the fall. So. We won't. yeah, it's a little too early to say, but significant expansion for next year. Yeah.
I'm hoping it'll be off to a better start than Camelina.
Absolutely, and there is some camelina down there if you want to compare, but big difference, herbicides, options, other big difference. It's a true industrial oil that actually has conversion benefits for some of these markets where, camelina is actually more of a healthy food oil. And so it's a vigorous crop, and it's a lot. If you're familiar with growing canola, you can take a lot of that knowledge and apply it to this crop, which is, because it is related, there's a lot of similarities in terms of fertility and whatnot. So
Your chemical list, I don't see Edge there.
Edge is on all of this stuff, yeah.
You did say earlier.
I can see it on your
Yeah. No, it's not on the list there. It's Edge and Treflan are both options there as well. So
What would your tolerances be for Roundup Ready canola in the crop?
we're working on some alternate modes of action for the crop. So it'll be a number of years before those come through.
But if you have some in your
Well, what are your options? Yeah, I mean in a
is it going to be penalized or as doping?
Oh no, it's industrial. There's the industrial component is uric acid, which canola already contains very small amounts. There's also a high uric acid rapeseed grown in Western Canada, so there's nothing new in the crop
But
itself.
if I go to market this and I have a problem with some Roundup Ready canola,
And there's tolerances established with it and all that. Absolutely.
it'll be downgraded.
Yep. No, it'd be treated a lot like other off types of mustard or whatever. Mustard actually has a similar oil profile. It's just a lot lower oil content. So
You're worried about the canola volunteers?
Yeah. Canola volunteer in this stuff.
Oh, canola volunteers and the stuff. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's it's an industrial crop, and the little bit of contamination with canola will still process.
An issue
Yep.
is whether they say a number 5 weed now in Alberta.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's certainly not as important.
It's not a
canola in it or mustard in it. And the other thing is green seed isn't as big a concern either. Obviously, it lowers oil content as well, but it's not destroying the fatty acid profile, or it's not a significant downgrade other than it's lighter seed then, and it's sort of slightly less weight to be paid for. But
Patrick, one of the things that kind of has been hindering camelina has been its issues with the meal. Are there any issues with Carinata meal? Is it perfectly okay to feed to everything? Or?
Well, it's a mustard meal, and there's work to be done on the Canadian side, but there's already a registration for mustard meal in the U.S. And as we already mentioned, that's where the crushing is going to be in the meantime. So it's basically meal's already taken care of. I mean, that is a key component, and so that's a part of the plan going forward. And I mean, we'd like to see, as the acres expand, obviously crushing set up in Western Canada for it, and meal approval is a big part of that. So.
Do you foresee breeding a plant that can actually a little bit more cold tolerant to areas to the north? Or?
Continuing to work, and there is a yield trial over there, and like we said, we'll actually show that at the Medicine Hat Day. But continuing to shorten the days to maturity is key, and like we said, it already has some pretty good frost tolerance to be able to go into those kinds of areas. So yeah, good. So there's information here, is all a little bit about the crop, all we know about the production today. We continually update this online, and I think Daryl is going to chat a little bit about the varieties and the trial there.
meaning 40, 60, 80 pounds of N, and a couple different seeding rates, 5, 6 pounds, and then different herbicides. So in the high input, we look at stacking, all the lists that he's mentioned over here, and actually using the highest management rate you could possibly use on some of these trials. So this is replicated with 2 dates of seeding right here. So we will be, as he said, that production manual and background information will be updated a lot this fall. Plus, our 2 guys out in the country looking at the, Bob and Trevor will be collecting information on what producers have done, who's found most successful recipes themselves with the playing they've done this year, and that information will all go into our updated production manual this fall and winter, both online and in the hard copy version. So I won't take a lot more time on that right now, because the next discussion is really based on the variety improvement, which is kind of exciting because it's a new crop and it's been worked on only a little while. If we could cross the road and see the Farming Smarter plots over there with the yield trials, you'd see some of the new types don't even hardly look like this one. They're much shorter, way more branched. But the big difference is the other species of canola and mustard carry their flowers more at the top of the canopy. And you'll see this flowers right down into the canopy. You can see buds coming down in here even, which probably gives it some of the heat stress tolerance because so much flower is right down in the canopy. And therefore, Billy, the other neat thing is we just grew it in Florida and had great results on it and found that there's actually sclerotinia resistant lines within our breeding program that are really highly immune to sclerotinia. And of course we found there was some susceptible like canola too. But there is great promise. Sorry, if it's too cut too slow, low? Yeah, well, we don't advise swathing it in the first place. It's a straight cut crop is what it's being handled as. So it's not really an issue, but I mean, we're not putting the potting too low. They still, I mean, I guess you can see it best here. If you look behind you, you can see how, what the 3 or 4 different days of extra growth does. And so what it takes all these little lower branches we're seeing down in here and pushes them up to the top more. So even though they open down here, they still elongate up. So if you just walk past all 3 planting dates, you'll see how fast it changes. Just over a few days. For insects, it's not a whole lot different than any of the other brassicas. It's just like mustards in every way, except for the fact Juncea will get chewed up by flea beetles much faster than canola or, I mean, they're both waxy leaf. So you look at the waxy leaf types, they're less damaged by flea beetles than the Juncea type. But other than that, they're pretty consistent across the board for brassicas. The neat thing we did mention, I know I got to hurry here, is the yield improvements. This A100 that's being grown this year, we've already got a new line in production in Milestone, Saskatchewan that increases the yield about 10-15% more, and another series of them just across the highway here that a couple of our favorites in there jump at another 10 or 15% again. So that's why the goal is to turn over varieties quickly, because there's no sense when that big a jump's happening every year. And at the same time, we're bringing down the maturity by a couple days each time in most cases and putting up the oil content. Because it is very possible to have 50% oil content and another 5, 7, 8 days earlier maturity in some of the new lines, and to pump up the Eurusic higher too. And that's without getting into our ETL technology, which is further down the road, where we can put in a cassette of new genes and have them all go in at a specific location, unlike old GM technology, and improve plant productivity, oil content, Eurusic, and make a super version of it. And so that we hope to put in some first trials in the US in November, December this year of some of the new super GM stack, but that's not going to be in the pipeline for some time.
Any use for the meal, for the byproduct?
Yeah, and that's a good point to cut up on from here to there, because our big breeding objective is to get the low gluten types like canola in the meal, so it would have every application that canola would. In fact, it would actually make a better meal because it has lower fiber content. So yeah, that's our breeding objective. So Rick Bennett came on from the University of Alberta to work with us starting in January, and that's his primary breeding objective, is yield and glucosinolates, getting it down. And so we have already found types with much, much lower glucosinolates, about a quarter of what we have now. And so those will be pushed along as quickly as possible, well, not hopefully going backwards in yield too much. And then of course we already have the hybrid system that works great, so we're starting to make experimental hybrids too, and we expect that can do another big bump in productivity. So it's kind of one of these crops that's so new, there's going to be so many developments over the next 5 years that it's kind of makes your head spin a bit into how many new things will be coming year after year after year. But it's exciting in that way, in that we're nowhere near a yield plateau or anything like that for a long time.
Globally, is this further events anywhere else in the world? Or?
No, Agri Soma has the world's biggest collection of germplasm, and nobody else has really put a lot of work into it. There's a little bit in Europe, and Spain in particular has played with it for quite a few years, but it's not been really commercialized to any significant extent anywhere else in the world.
Do you think this is the right climate for it?
The climate of North America is great. Obviously, we had a winter crop in Florida, it looked great. In Tennessee, Arkansas was a winter crop, it looked good. Obviously, it works really good as a summer crop too, and the frost tolerance, I mean, it got tested good in Florida this year with 25, 26 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures for a week off and on, almost every night. Came through great, so